So with sound, if we want a space to be special, we can see how we're going to make the sound different than it usually is. If a place is usually cacophonous and noisy, then creating an event that's quiet and calm can be really, really special. So think of a college courtyard where there are usually lots of events, a lot of people talking. If we create an event where we make it calm, then maybe an honoring ceremony or a memorial ceremony, all of a sudden that becomes much more special because we're used to being in that space when it's noisy. If a place is used to being quiet, for example, in a library or maybe your living room or backyard, making it more loud could be special. Maybe not for the whole event because most of us don't want to be at a loud event for hours, but making a part of that loud, either musically or just with riotous sound of cheering. So we can think, well, what are the contrasts of what's usually going on there that indicates, hey, this is special?
I want to go back to something you mentioned when we were talking about sound, because you mentioned music, and it made me realize that there are certain ceremonies that happen, certain rituals that happen in certain spaces where there's music associated with. For example, a wedding, and we all think about the song that people play typically when the bride and groom come down the aisle. Or a graduation ceremony where we all think about, certain music that is played in that kind of circumstance. Or even a funeral, that there's often, things like taps that are played at a military funeral, for example. So music is a part of that as well, right?
It is. You're talking about music that's put in intentionally to shift the mood of an event. And it can be very, very powerful. Words often speak to our intellect. When we're serving food, it often, amongst other things, speaks to our body. Music most powerfully affects our emotion. It can do other things as well. But when I think of, the most basic elements that are creating experience, the music affects our mood or the emotion. The words speak to the intellect and meaning, and the food at some level affects our body. So we can think about, well, what is the mood that we want to introduce with the music? And obviously there are some traditions where we have certain expectations and we can choose to fulfill the expectations or work against them. The warning is when creating a sacred space, I've noticed that many people are afraid it'll feel boring. And so what they do is they turn on just any music or music they like loudly, and it becomes distracting. And they don't have any good reason to have that music other than they think, based on no other standard, that it's a good idea. And they don't understand that it's actually pulling away from the intention that they invited people to participate in.
So be very intentional about the music and use it to sort of set the scene. And almost similar to what you're talking about with light, you don't want the light to distract from the thing that's important. You don't want the music
Exactly right.
to distract from the thing that's important either.
I think it's a great point, Seth. All of these elements that we're talking about are something to consider. They're tools that can be used to enhance because you have intention. But if you just throw stuff in the space because you've seen other people do it or you saw it in a movie, it quickly becomes distracting. And in my experience, most people are just really excited to be in a space with people they care about, that share their values, and that have come to do something that they think is important. And we don't need to work very hard to entertain them or create distracting experiences if the intention is set correctly.
So sometimes less is more.
Very often, less is more. I think you and I are unfortunately in a culture where there's so many opportunities to fill our senses with portable music and portable lights and, literally an endless stream of talking, that we've forgotten that it doesn't take very much with intention to create a powerful event. In fact, Seth, you've probably noticed when communities, be they a school or a church or a neighborhood, experience a tragedy, there is a longing for a moment of silence. And I think that people who long for that silence don't even recognize what they're longing for is a sacred time, a time set aside where things are different to honor what's changed. They just want silence. And there's a reason that there's a longing for silence and not different and more distraction.